Hi, I'm Stéphane Treyvaud. I would like to talk to you today about our two bodies. You're probably wondering what that is, but before I get into it, just a little introduction. When I was 17 years old, because of fortuitous circumstances, I got to meet Graf Dürckheim. Now, he was a German psychologist who was the first Westerner to spend about 10 years in Japan, becoming a Zen master and bringing Zen meditation to the West. That was in the Black Forest in Germany. And so I ended up working with him for a while, and he distinguished at the time, to say it in German, der Körper, den man hat, und der Leib, den man ist. In German, you have two different words for body, der Körper and der Leib. Der Körper is more like our notion of body. It is the body that we have. Der Leib is a more encompassing, more holistic notion of the body that has psychological, existential, and spiritual connotation. So it corresponds, if we were to translate that into English, more like the organism. So I like to say the body that we have and the organism that we are. In fact, in the Catholic Church, when you go to communion and the priest hands you the body of Christ, he says, der Leib Christi. So it's that more encompassing way that is, in fact, the body-mind or the mind-body. So let's look at this issue of our two bodies. And they're really about relationships. Meditation is by far not a solitary kind of practice or training. Meditation is all about relationships. It is about our relationship with ourselves and our relationship to others. In fact, there's a circuitry in the brain called the resonance circuitry that is responsible for both our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to others. So when we practice meditation and we practice regulating the energy flow through meditation, what we're actually practicing is also to regulate and to integrate the resonance circuitry, so that in looking at and modifying our relationship to ourselves, we also modify our relationship to others and to the world, and vice versa. When we change and modify our relationship to a loved ones, to somebody else, we also change and modify our relationship to ourselves. So it's about relationship, and in this video we're going to look more particularly at our relationship to the body. So let's start with the body that we have as opposed to the organism that we are. We'll get to that a little later. So let's start with the body that we have. Now, if I asked you, are you a hand, or are you your hand, you would probably be a bit perplexed by this question. Am I my hand? It's maybe, maybe not. Kind of a strange question, isn't it? But if I ask you, do you have a hand, or do you have two hands? Yeah. Of course I do. Here it is. All right. So this is the body that we have. So here it is. I have this hand. In the same way, now notice that, in the same way that I have a lawnmower. So you can see that there is a distance between me, I, and something that I own, my hand. I own this hand. This hand belongs to me, not unlike the lawnmower that I have belongs to me. It is my lawnmower. So we have a very clear subject-object split here. So let's look at it a little deeper. So if I asked you, can you describe this hand that you have? What would you say? Well, you would probably say, well, it has 5 fingers, all right. What is this hand made of? Well, it's made of flesh and muscles and bones and arteries and veins and nerves and tendons and nails and skin and hair. That's what my hand is made of. Okay, so if you look at that a little closer, what you just said, for example, it has arteries, veins, tendons. Do you see that as a direct experience? Do you feel that as a direct experience, or is that something that you assume because you have been learning that at school from anatomy books and so on, that if you opened this hand, you would see bones, you would see arteries and veins and so on, which is exactly the case. You don't see the veins. Well, you might see a few veins superficially here, but you don't see all the deep veins, and you don't see the deep structures, but you know that they are there. So this hand that I have, I can describe in an intellectual or conceptual way. So what you have described is not what you directly experience, is what you indirectly know, what your brain has constructed as knowledge that your hand is supposed to have. And of course, to be sure, you would have to cut it open and check, but let's not do that right now. And we assume that, there's a good likelihood that it is not a robot hand, it is not made of steel and plastic, but in fact, it is made of these things that we talked about. So what we just used, the words we just used are concepts. They are not direct experience. We can also say concepts are thoughts. Okay? So when I ask you to describe this hand that you have, you gave me thoughts. Or I can say, you showed me a map of this hand. To be more visceral, you gave me the menu about the meal. You don't give me your direct experience of it. You gave me a description, a map of it. So these are thoughts. So everything that you tell me, well, this hand has fingers and so on, these are thoughts. Not direct experiences, but indirect constructions. We call them also representations. They are not the direct presentations of living, but they are representations about life. So all of that is quite important and quite interesting because, as we said at the beginning, this is about this rather distant relationship to this thing here called hand that we say we have. So when something goes wrong with this hand, what do we do quite instinctively? And we do that when anything goes wrong with this body that we have. What do we do? First of all, it's painful. We want to get rid of it. That's the first thing that we have to notice. We want to get rid of it. And how do we do that? The same way, or the same thing that we do when our lawnmower breaks down. What do we do? And particularly when we don't know anything about lawnmowers, what do? We bring the lawnmower to the person who fixes it. Well, we do the same with the body that we have. We take this hand, we go to the doctor, we say, hey doctor, here is my hand, fix it. Now you notice that in this act, I have nothing to do with this hand. It's my hand, I own it, so I'm going to make sure that it works well and that it is healthy, but when there's something wrong, I know nothing about this hand. I give it to the specialist, hey doctor, please fix it. The doctor is in the same frame of mind. He takes my hand, looks at it, makes a diagnosis, and, in quote, fixes it. He does something, whether it is an operation or a cast or a Band-Aid or whatever it may be. He does something that is allowing the hand then to be fixed. And then I go home and wait, and after a while, this hand is fixed. And in this whole transaction, I had nothing to do much with this hand. It's the doctor who had to do something with this hand. And also, very importantly, the doctor had very little to do with me. The doctor had mainly something to do with the hand. And that has very deep consequences, particularly when we talk about issues in psychiatry or general issues of health. But let's take a psychological issue that I encounter all the time. We encounter all the time. Somebody goes to the doctor and says, I'm depressed. The doctor does a quote, a diagnosis, which is not really a diagnosis in psychiatry at all, as you well know. In other words, if I go to the doctor and says I have a cough, the doctor's diagnosis is not a cough. The doctor's diagnosis may be, let's say, pneumonia. That means that there's a virus that is attacking the lungs and is causing the cough. That's a real diagnosis. In psychiatry, we don't have that. The doctors go through a list of symptoms to experience that, to experience that, to experience that, and then says, oh, your diagnosis is depression, which is really not a diagnosis in the sense that it says nothing about the cause. It's simply, you go and say, I have depression, and the doctor says, yeah, the diagnosis is depression. It doesn't get you too much further. But now, because of this whole mindset of our relationship to the body that we have, that not only we have ourselves, but the doctor has towards himself or herself and towards you, what happens is that the doctor looks at you and say, yeah, you do have a depression, it has been lasting for a while, you are not, it interferes with your life. What you're having is a chemical imbalance. And so people then get away or come away from the doctor's office thinking, oh, I have a depression because I'm having a chemical imbalance. That again is upside down. Because the question is, well, where does this chemical imbalance come from? And in fact, yes, there are sometimes, but it's more the exception than the rule. But sometimes people have depressions for no psychological reasons that we can understand. So that these people do exist. But a lot of the time, this chemical imbalance has a reason. In other words, you don't have a depression because you have a chemical imbalance, but you have a chemical imbalance because you are depressed. So the question is, well, why are you depressed? And that's very often a question that doesn't come up at the doctor's office. Even with psychiatrists, it has become a question that is often not explored. Why? Because we are steeped in this relationship of ourselves towards this body that we have. So I am depressed, and so as a consequence, we are going to fix this body that you have with some kind of chemical. However, what's forgotten in this whole transaction is that we are not just a body that we have. Humans have a mind. In fact, we are a body-mind. The body and the mind cannot be separated. They are one. We are an organism that has an inseparable interaction and unit of body and mind. And what we forget is that the mind is about the organism that we are. And we forget that the mind has a tremendous impact on the body. In other words, how we regulate the mind, how we learn to regulate the energy flow of the mind is going to have a profound consequence on our physical, psychological, existential, and spiritual health. So the moment you ask in this imaginary office, oh, you're depressed, let me find out a bit more about you. And let's find out how, with your whole history of many years, you got to where you are now. So if you explore the person's childhood, what they went through, how this childhood experience has evolved in the adult brain, how then old patterns and conflicts are being woven into the adult's way of living, and how that is causing the symptoms. And then, of course, how through learning and through training the mind to rewire the brain through the regulation that we can learn, we can change the energy flows in such a way through psychotherapy and through meditation. We can change it in such a way that this chemical balance that we unwittingly created simply by growing up and living our adult lives disappears. The symptoms disappear. We become more integrated and healthy. And yes, sometimes it does make sense to help this psychological process with a bit of a chemical that influences directly the chemistry of the brain, but oftentimes that's not necessary. So, let's come back to this body that we have and the organism that we are. So now that we have a sense of the body that we have and all the consequences that come from it, by the way, I could mention also certain physical illnesses. As you know, an incredible 60 or 70% of symptomatic complaints that people get into the doctor's office for have a psychological origin, stress and so on. So when we look at our physical health, the same thing happens. Something goes wrong. The blood pressure becomes a little high, or the cholesterol gets high, whatever. Again, we take this body that we have to the doctor and say, fix it, as if we had nothing to do with what's going on. It's just something that we own. The doctor gives a medication and then we think that it's being fixed, forgetting that we are also this organism that we are, and that in many cases we actually contribute to the physical breakdown. And of course, there are many good doctors who will say, well, you know what, your blood pressure is starting to get a bit high. I can see that you are under a lot of stress. Why don't you take a mindfulness program, learn meditation, and then see whether you can decrease your stress and see whether that might have a positive impact on your blood pressure. And often it does, sometimes it doesn't, and then you have to take medication. But that is that connection between the body that we have and the organism that we are. So, you are now familiar with this body that you have, and you have described it, and we have established the fact that the way that we described it are thoughts. It's indirect. It's an indirect experience of this hand. So let's move now to the organism that we are. So how would this hand look like from the perspective of the organism that we are, the body that we are, der Leib, den man ist? Or you can even say, the hand that I am. Because this hand is me, like this head is me and this leg is me. It's all me in a psychological, existential sense. There is no such thing as Stéphane without everything that is here. So, now I do have to say that, of course, the Stéphane that I am would still be the Stéphane that I am if God forbid something happened and I lost my hand. I would still be the Stéphane that I am, and that will lead us to some other considerations and reflections that I will leave aside for now. But let's come back to this the hand that I am? How do I discover the hand that I am? And of course, if I can discover the hand that I am, I can discover the arm that I am, I can discover the body that I am, the whole organism that I am. I can actually discover who am I from the point of view of direct experience, the one who lives life. So, if I now tune into the hand that I am, I'm going to notice somatic sensations. Soma is the Greek word for body. And I differentiate physical from somatic in the same way that I differentiate the body that we have from the organism that we are. The physical body is the body that we have. That's how I use the terms. The somatic body is the body that we directly experience. So, what is my direct experience of this hand? Well, if I pay attention right now, and if you feel your hand, you're going to have different somatic experiences. So, my somatic experiences right now, when I tune in, are a slight tingling and slight tensing in the index finger, a slight tingling at the tip of all fingers. It is more pronounced in the index finger and the ring finger than it is in the little finger. I also experienced here the touch of my shirt onto the top of my hand. There's a region here that is more cold, and this region here is much warmer. I experience a buzzing almost, but it's very, very faint in the whole hand. There's a tension that goes from the top of the middle finger through the tendon all the way to the wrist, a slight tension. And so forth. So that is the hand that I am. This is the direct experience of my hand. And as you can see, that separation, that distance that I had before when I described my hand as the hand that I have is not there anymore. What I'm telling you, yes, I do use words to describe what I'm experiencing, but I use the words to describe to you what I'm directly experiencing, not what I am imagining and know about. So I'm not showing you a map of my hand the way I did before when I told you what this hand that I have is made of. I'm actually giving you a direct access into the hand that I'm directly experiencing. So I know that my attention is in the somatic sensations of my body. And of course, when we practice that again and again, that has profound consequences in our relationship, not only to ourselves, but also to others and to the world. So first of all, in the relationship to ourselves, remember how I said with the hand that we have, when it's in pain, we want to get rid of the pain, and then we take the hand to the doctor and say, fix it. With the hand that I am, yeah, of course, if it's possibly broken and all of that, of course, the hand that I have is also a reality, and I may need to take it to the doctor so that he can fix it. That is part of the reality. But an important part is, imagine for a moment that it's not really something that the doctor needs to fix, but there's a pain in the hand. Then if it's the hand that I am, that pain is not something really that I want to get rid of. But it is like an alarm light. It's a red light. It's an alarm bell. It's something that tells me, it's information that tells me, hey, pay attention here. I am in pain. I'm struggling. There's something wrong here. You are not paying enough attention to something that you create in the way that you live, and so on. So it's that aspect that opens up when we pay attention to the organism that we are. So now, rather than trying to get away from the pain, trying to get rid of it, I'm going to turn towards the pain. I'm going to invite the pain in, so to speak, for tea, and begin to listen to the pain, begin to embrace the pain, and let it speak to me, so that I can start to find out what I am overlooking, what maybe I am repressing, I am pushing away, I am dissociating from. I don't want to know, even though the only way to heal is if I get to know it. So that is one aspect of this this change of attitude that comes from opening up to the hand that I am. Now, in terms of the relationship to others, so let's say the relationship to the doctor. So yes, I will go to the doctor. So let's take the blood pressure, for example. So I will go to the doctor and say, have a look at my blood pressure. Is there something that needs to be done from a, in quote, mechanical point of view, like do I have to have the lawnmower fixed? Do you have to give me medication, or is the blood pressure, the higher blood pressure, is it due to something else, a tumor or something that needs that kind of fixing from the perspective of the body that I have, that I bring to you, doctor, to be fixed. So that's one aspect. But if I also am connected to the organism that I am, I will also be with the doctor in a conversation about, well, how is it that I'm living, and the way that I live, the way that I disregard my mind, my body, and create stress, how is that participating in causing this problem with the blood pressure? And as I said before, the doctor might actually say, you know what, it's a good idea for you first to deal with this stress, because this stress is going to cause you many more breakdowns in all kinds of ways. So then I can go home and begin to look at my life and look at how is it that I have to put it kind of extreme a little bit, how is it that I don't have a very good relationship with myself? How is it that I abuse the organism that I am? And when we encompass both aspects, you can say it's the aspect of science and the aspect of existential being. When we encompass both aspects, that's when we really get to an integrated and profound sense of holistic health. And that is what we practice when we practice mindfulness meditation, and also when we explore who we are in a good psychotherapy. Thank you for listening.